Hello and welcome to week 2 of distance learning. I miss each one of you so very much. It's so much easier to teach you when you're right across the table from me and I can see your faces smiling or not smiling. I can't wait till we're back together again. So make sure you come visit me in the fall when you move on to the middle school and come give me a big old hug and tell me how you're doing. Last week we talked about division with decimals, where I already had a decimal in the problem and you just moved that decimal straight up, but you had to add some zeros to it to continue on so that you didn't have a remainder. This week we're going to talk about fractions, but not as a typical fraction. We're going to turn those fractions into division problems. So just like last week, I expect during this lesson that you are following along, that you are trying to solve the problems with me as well. If I go too fast, you pause it, please, and then you just continue to press play, and you work at your own pace so that we can do these problems together, please. So you're going to need some paper. If you have it, I recommend that you have lined notebook paper, and you're going to turn that sideways so that the lines are nice columns for you. So paper, please. You also need a pencil, no pen, and a multiplication chart to help you. So hit pause, and I'll see you back here in just a minute. All right, so remember we are working with fractions as division. Here's our first problem here. We've got 1/2 with 1 being our numerator and 2 being our denominator. As we look at this fraction bar here that separates the numerator and the denominator, you need to think about that fraction bar as actually being our division bar, because we have 1 out of 2, which that division bar is actually, our fraction bar is actually our division bar. Last week you all did a great job putting up with my messy handwriting, and so this week I thought I'd be a little bit nicer to all of us, and I have some numbers over here, and I'm just gonna drag them to create our problem, and it should be a lot nicer and neater for all of us. So looking at this problem, 1/2, our numerator of 1 is going to go inside the division bracket, and our denominator of 2 is going to go on the outside. That is our divisor. Okay, so I've got 1 divided by 2. Compare that to your fraction so that you're always placing that top number inside and the bottom number on the outside. Okay, so we have 1 divided by 2. So let's go ahead and look at our division. Immediately I'm thinking to myself, if I have one thing, can I share that with 2 people? And the answer to that is no, absolutely not. So what do? Am I done with my problem? No. I'm going to add that invisible decimal, and then I can add a 0. I have not changed the value of the problem. Now I'm looking at, this is 10. Oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot to add that decimal straight up in my answer. Now I can look at this as 10. If I have 10, can I share it with 2 people? The answer to that is yes. So then follow your 2's across in your multiplication chart, or your skip counting by 2's. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. It can go in 5 times. Divide, multiply. I used 5 2 times. 5 times 2 is 10. Divide, multiply, then subtract. Sorry there. And then subtract. Numbers the same, zeros the game. Okay? Because I already added on a decimal with a 0, there's no more numbers to bring down. So 1/2 is equivalent to 0.5. Let's try another one together. I have the fraction 2/4. My numerator is 2, goes on the inside of the fraction. My denominator of 4 goes on the outside. That is the divisor. Right? So I'm thinking to myself, I have 2 things. Can I share it with 4 people? No, I don't have enough. X goes on top. I'm not done. I have that hidden decimal right here. Think about changing like $2 to $2.00. So I can add a 0 here. It does not change the value. So now I'm thinking 4. How many times can it go into 20? Yeah, did you catch me again? I didn't bring my decimal up 2 times in a row. Man, Mrs. Spitzley. You know, if we were in class, I'd be handing you candy, right? Because you caught my mistake. All right, so 4 goes into 20. How many times? Follow your 4 across in your multiplication chart. 5 times. Goes up on top. Divide, multiply. 5 times 4 is 20. Divide, multiply, then subtract. Numbers are the same, and so 0 is the game. Again, because I already added the 0 here, there's not another number to bring down. 2/4 is also equivalent to 0.5. Okay. Another problem tried together. I've got 5/8. Again, that fraction bar is division, so I've got 5 divided by 8. 5 goes on the inside. Your denominator goes on the outside. It is your divisor. I'm thinking to myself, if I have 5 things, can I share it with 8 people? Nope, can't do it. I don't have enough to even go around one time. So I put over my x. I'm going to add my decimal and a 0. I'm catching myself this time. I'm going to bring my decimal straight up in the problem. And I'm thinking to myself, if I have 50, how many can I share with 8 people? So follow your 8 across on your multiplication chart. What'd you come up with? Okay. 6, divide, multiply. 8 times 6 is 48. Divide, multiply, then subtract. Okay. Got a subtraction. Numbers are not the same. So I'm going to ask myself, more on top or more on the floor? More on the floor. I'm going to go next door and borrow 10 more. The 5 becomes a 4. The 10 becomes a 1. 10 minus 8. You know I like to count up. So 8, 9, 10. I've got 2. Gonna drag there. So I've got 2, 4, numbers the same. Okay. We talked last week. If you have a decimal here, you may not have a remainder. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna add another 0. Okay. Now I can excuse me. Now I can bring that down. And I'm going to divide again. 8 goes into 20 how many times? Follow your 8 across the multiplication chart. And it will go in 2 times. Multiply. You use 2 8 times. 2 times 8 is 16. Okay. Numbers are not the same. So I'm going to ask myself when I subtract, more on top or more on the floor? More on the floor again. Here we go. Let's do some regrouping. And take 1 away here. It becomes a 1. This becomes a 10. You know I like to count up. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Gives me 4 left. Numbers the same. 0 is the game. Again, can't have a remainder. So I'm going to add another 0 up here. It does not change the value of the number. I'm going to bring that 0 down. Now I'm going to divide 40 by 8. 8 goes into 40 how many times? Follow that across on your multiplication chart. And it is 5. Multiply. 5 times 8 is 40. Numbers are the same. 0 is the game. Right? So 5/8 is equal to 0.625 or 625 hundredths. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. Thousandths. 625 thousandths. I will give you a hint here. This first one, we only had to add 1 0. Second one, 1 0. Third one, we had to add 3 zeros. You will never have to go more than 3 zeros. My other hint to you is this. When you have a denominator of 8, or you're dividing by 8, you will always have to go out 3 zeros. Okay? This next one, I would like you to do a little bit with me, and then you're going to pause and see what you can do on your own, okay? So the 2 over 3, 2 is going to go on the inside, and the 3 on the outside. Right? Now I'd like you to pause and work until you get stuck. When you get stuck, go ahead and hit play and see how far you got before you have to check in with me. All right, welcome back. Thanks for working until you got stuck. And first question I'm asking myself is, if I have 2, how can I share it with 3 people? And the answer is no. So I'm going to put myself an X and my decimal, and then add a 0. Bring my decimal up into my answer. And now I'm looking at 3. How many times does it go into 20 without going over? So I followed my 3 across on the multiplication chart, and I got 6. Multiply. 6 times 3 is 18. And I subtracted. I actually gave you guys a really tricky one to try on your own. So I hope you made it this far before you got stuck. Numbers are not the same, so I'm asking myself more on top or more on the floor. The answer is more on the floor. So I'm going next door. This becomes a 1, 10. 8, 9, 10. I get 2. Sorry, I keep forgetting I have these fancy numbers. Okay, 2. Can't have a remainder, so I'm going to add a 0. And bring that down. I'm going to divide again. Okay, 3 goes into 20. How many times? And the answer to that is 6. Multiply. 6 times 3 is 18. Numbers are not the same, so I better be careful while I'm subtracting, and I'm going to ask myself that same age-old question. More on top or more on the floor? More on the floor again. So I'm going to borrow. Go next door and borrow 10 more. 8, 9, 10. It's 2. And over here, numbers the same, 0 is the game. Okay, here's where I hope you got this far before you got stuck and turned on the video to talk to me a little bit, okay? You may have continued this. If you did, you should have ended up with 6s all the way across here because there's a pattern here. Every time you multiplied, you would have gotten 18. Every time you subtracted, you would have gotten a 2. And then every time you added a 0, you would have gotten a 20. So let me just highlight those because I'm hoping you're seeing the pattern here, okay? There's a 20 here. There's a 20 here. There's a 2 here, so that when you add another 0 and bring it down, you're going to end up with a 20 right here, okay? You subtract, there's a 6 here, which gives you 18. There's a 6 here, which gives you an 18. You're going to do another 6 here, which gives you an 18. There's a pattern here. And unfortunately, this goes on and on and on for eternity, for infinity. So I'm not going to be cruel and make you continue this. So I'm wondering if Mrs. Comstock and Mrs. Spink taught this to you in your own classroom. If not, this is what you do with it, okay? You literally just hold up your hand and you're like, stop, I cannot do this anymore, this is insane. And you literally put a cap on it, like this, a straight line, you put a cap on it. It's like holding out your hand and saying, enough, stop. And what you're saying is, when you put this cap on it, is that you're saying that this 6 continues to repeat itself forever and ever and ever and ever. So another way of putting it is, you could just say it's 0.6 with a cap on it like this, because that 6 goes on and 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 on forever and ever and ever. And that is the only tricky problem that I gave you today, I promise. Okay, let's take a look at this one. And I want you to work as far as you can until you get stuck. And then I'll see you back here with this one again. Oh, I lied. It's another tricky one, I think, maybe. I don't know. See you back here when you get stuck. Pause the video, please. All right, welcome back. Let's see how far you got before you got stuck. All right, numerator of 1 goes here. Denominator of 6 goes out here. So I have 1, divided by 6. All right, if I have one thing, I cannot share it with 6 people, so I immediately have an X. I'm going to put my decimal here and add a 0. It does not change its value at all. Bring the decimal up into my answer, and I'm going to ask myself, if I have 10 things, how many can I share with everyone without running out? So I followed my 6 across, and I got a 1. Divide, multiply. 1 times 6 is 6. And then I need to do my subtraction. I hope you line that up correctly. All right. Now, you can think about this as more on the floor, so you need to regroup. But if you do, you end up with the same problem anyhow. It's 10 minus 6. So even if you didn't regroup, you're fine, as long as you ended up with a 4. Fancy numbers, Mrs. Spitzley. All right, so you ended up with a 4. Okay. No remainders, so I add a 0. I'm going to bring that down. And now I've got a 40. So 6 goes into 40 how many times? It will go in 6 times. Multiply. 6 times 6 is 36. And then I need to subtract. Numbers are not the same, so I'm going to ask myself, more on top or more on the floor? There's more on the floor. So come over here, that's going to become a 3, this becomes a 10. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is 4. No remainder, so I'm going to add a 0. Okay, and there's where I'm going to stop. Here's why. Did you catch on to this? Here's a 40, and here's a 40. If I continued to do this problem, if I divided this again with 40, I'm going to come up with the same 6 that I had right here. Some of you may have taken that last step. So this is a, oh no, it's going to go on and on and on again forever and ever and ever. Just stop. Can't handle it anymore. So we're literally going to put a cap. I don't want that anymore. I literally want to put a cap on that 6. Okay? Where last time the 6 is the only thing that continued. The 6 continues here, but we also have this 1 here. So we're going to be real careful as we write our answer. We're going to have its decimal 1, 6, but the 6 is the only thing that continues. So we're going to put a cap on just the 6. Boy, Mrs. Spitzley's choosing tricky things for you. She must be thinking you're getting super smart during our distance learning. All right, last problem. I promise this one's easier. Go ahead and pause. I want you to pause. I want you to work all the way through until you get stuck, and then go ahead and hit play if you're stuck, or hit play just to do a self-check. See you back in a minute. All right, welcome back. Let's see how far you got. I've got 2 divided by 5. So 2 divided by 5 for 2/5. If I have 2 things, can I share it with 5 people? The answer is no. So I put an X. I'm going to add a decimal 0. It does not change the value. And I'm going to bring my decimal straight up into my answer. And I'm thinking to myself, if I have 20, how many can I share with 5 people? Follow your 5 across in your multiplication chart, or you can just count by 5s. 5, 10, 15, 20. 4 times. Divide, multiply. 4, 5 times is 20. Haha, told you it would be easy. You didn't believe me after those last 2. All right, my numbers are the same, and so 0's the game. I am absolutely done. So 2/5 is the same as 0.4. All right, not as bad as you thought, was it? Or maybe it was. So make sure you read the side notes here as I'm finishing up our conversation. Your assignment is on the slides. It's also in your packet if you have one of those as well. So there are, I don't know what I gave you, maybe 7 problems to do. So do your very best. Work until you're proud with it. The answer key is also in your packet. It is also on the distance learning slides. So if you're stuck or if you just want to self-check, you can look at those there. Also, please take a look at the weekly review. It was not on the e-learning slides. It was on your packet, though. I want you to stay up on all of those skills that we were working so very hard on before you left in March. So there's some multiplication, there's some division, there's some fraction work as well. Also, make sure you check out Mrs. Comstock's video this week. Those are things that you should be very super good at because you were doing those with me before we left in March. So do your very best, work until you're proud, and know that you're loved. Have an amazing week, and I'll see you next time.